wedding cake. So I have my cakes done on the counter, they're cooling. I'm making a Swiss meringue buttercream, which is meringue, egg whites, and sugar that will add a lot of strength to the buttercream. It helps it to be a little bit more stable. So right now I'm separating the eggs. So in order to do that, I have room temperature eggs, which makes it a lot easier. I'm putting the egg whites into a bowl, and usually you're supposed to do it into a smaller bowl first, so in case a little bit of yolk gets in it, you've only ruined one egg and not the whole batch. But I'm taking a gamble right now, feeling a little bit confident. So I'm putting the egg whites directly into my mixing bowl, and then the egg yolks are going into a container for another purpose. Maybe I'll make some ice cream or something. Okay, so I have my 8 egg whites. I added a 1.5 cups of sugar, and then I have a pan of simmering water. I'm gonna put my bowl on top of that pan, and I'm gonna whisk this until the mixture comes to 160 degrees. You don't want it to go over because that'll start cooking the eggs, but at that temperature, it will kill any bacteria that might be in the egg whites. So that's the difference between a Swiss meringue and an Italian meringue. In a Swiss meringue, you warm up the egg whites together with the sugar, and then we'll whip them up to stiff peaks. In an Italian meringue, you whip the egg whites to stiff peaks, and you heat the sugar pretty hot. I can't remember, it's like 275 or something, and then you would put the hot sugar into the whipped egg whites. So it's a little bit more complicated that way. It's the Italian meringue is a lot more stable at room temperature, but the Swiss meringue is a lot easier. It makes sure that we kill the bacteria, and it still is pretty stable, and it tastes really good too. So I will check back in once we're at 160. Okay, we're at 160, whoops, I just pulled it out a little bit. We're at 160 degrees. So I'm gonna pull it off of the stove, and then we're gonna go directly over to the mixer, and we're gonna put the whisk attachment on, and then we're gonna whisk it until some stiff peaks form, and that's probably gonna take about 5 to 10 minutes. Oops. Okay. I'll check back with you later. Okay, so as you can see, the egg whites are nice and stiff. I'm going to turn it back on. You also want to feel the bottom of the bowl to make sure that it's not too hot. If the mixture is still too hot, it's going to end up melting the butter, and you're going to have a hot mess on your hands. But it is cool. Still a little lukewarm, but it's not going to melt my butter. So I'm going to turn it back on low, and I'm going to put in about a tablespoon of butter at a time. And as you can see here, I've got 6 sticks of butter, and I'm going to put it all in there, but you want to do it a little bit at a time. So I'm going to turn it back on here. And you just put in about a tablespoon at a time. This is room temperature butter. It's been sitting out on the counter for a couple hours. If you try to put in cold butter, it won't work. If your butter is too hot, it'll be kind of melty, but you just want it to be kind of room temperature. And it doesn't seem like it's going to mix in at first, but just keep adding the butter, and eventually at the end it all comes together. So I'll check back in with you once I put the 6 sticks of butter in there. Not sure if you can see, but there is a period of time where it looks kind of like a soupy curdled mess, but I'm just going to keep mixing it, and it eventually comes back together. So okay, I don't know if you can see that. It still looks kind of curdled. It's going to take probably another 3 to 5 minutes of mixing it like that, but I just want you to know that if you have kind of a mess like that, don't give up. Just keep mixing it, and eventually it comes together into a really nice creamy consistency. Okay, so I'm done mixing the buttercream, and I'm ready to frost my cake. You will need to scrape down the sides at some point in the mixing process just to make sure that there aren't any other clumps of butter. It kind of looks like light fluffy Cool Whip if Cool Whip were made out of butter. So I don't know if that makes sense, but all right, I'm getting ready to put my cake together now. Okay, so I have my buttercream already. I have my cake layers that are baked and cooled. I'm going to take them out of their pans. These little ones, some of them have a removable bottom, which is kind of fun, but I also put parchment on the bottom of the cakes so that they would release a little bit easier. So I'm going to peel off the parchment. On my bottom layer, I'm going to put the cake part down that's going to fill out all the way to the sides. Let me rinse my fingers real quick. It's got a little sticky from the cake. Okay, and then I'm going to spread a layer of buttercream between each of my layers of cake. So I like using a long offset spatula. You can also see here I have a Lazy Susan that I set up with some non-stick drawer liner. I put a bowl just to lift my cake up a little bit, and then some more rubber so that it doesn't move around on me. And I always err on the side of a little bit too much, because anything that falls out the side, we're gonna scoop out around and smooth out anyways. So I use my Lazy Susan here. I'm just trying to create a nice even layer to eliminate any parts where the cake has domed or anything like that, so that I don't get a lumpy or tilted cake. So I'm going to continue stacking layers in the same way, and then I'm going to put it in the refrigerator, let it set up just a little bit before I do the outsides. So again, here's my next layer. I'm going to peel off the parchment that I put in the bottom of my cake pan first. I'm going to put this one on upside down, and then I'm going to continue with putting cake, buttercream, and end with cake. And I'll check back in when it's put together. Okay, so I just put my last layer on top. I'm going to give it a little bit more buttercream before I put it into the refrigerator, just to give it a little bit of coating. I don't want to do too much because I want it to be a little bit more solid so that I can shape it, making sure that it's not leaning one way or the other. It's a little bit challenging with this tiny one, but I like to do the small ones first and get them out of the way so that I can use all the remaining frosting for my bigger layers. So as soon as I'm done with this one, I'm going to repeat the exact same process with my 8-inch cake. You can see I'm kind of making a mess here, but that's okay. It'll clean up later. I'm trying to be very careful with this one, holding on to the cardboard so that I don't knock it off, even with the grip there. Again, I'm going to come back with another smooth this out just a little bit after it's had a chance to set. I just don't want it to tip over too much in one direction, but I did want to get a little bit of buttercream there on the outside. So I'm going to twirl it around once. You can see I have a big gap right there, so I'm going to throw a little bit of buttercream on there, scrape some of it off. Again, this one's harder because it's a really lightweight cake, so it's not staying put as much as a bigger, heavier cake will. This is a vanilla chiffon cake, which is really light and fluffy, made by separating the eggs and folding the egg whites into the batter. I'm going to put a light coating on top here, and then when I pull it out of the refrigerator in maybe about 20 minutes or so, I'll be able to smooth it just a little bit more. You want to make sure when you're doing the top that you don't get a whole bunch right in the middle of the cake, because that'll lead to a shape that you don't really want on a wedding cake. So I usually use the side of the offset spatula and scrape, and then make sure that I put a little bit more frosting in areas where it seems a little bit low. You want to keep turning it to make sure that you can see it's low over here on this side, and by turning it, it allows you to see where your problems are. So again, for just my first round for the crumb coat, I'm just about done. I'm going to scrape one more time along the sides. You don't want to mush it in at the top there, but I do want to take some of this off. And that is ready to go into the refrigerator for the first coat. Okay, so you can see I'm almost done with the 8-inch tier here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to finish up one last time around the sides just to smooth it out a little bit. The bride I'm baking this for wants a more rustic finish on it, so Just really doing the crumb coat here. And then I'm just going to show you how to finish off the top. You want your spatula to be nice and clean, and any of these edges, you just gently kind of push them into the center. And that's the difference between a professional looking wedding cake and a home cake. Is traditionally the home cake will be a little bit domed, whereas in a professional wedding cake, you've built the edges up quite nicely and then have tried to level it as much as possible across the top. So this one is almost ready to go. A couple more finishing touches, and then I'm going to throw it in the fridge to chill. Okay, so now that I have the cake smoothed out to about where I want it, again, I'm leaving this one rustic. I'm going to measure all the way around and take the lowest measurement. I'm going to measure from the top of the cardboard to the top of the cake. And so if I do that all the way around, I get about 3.5 inches, and you always want to go with your lowest measurement. So what I've done is I've cut down some bendy straws, making sure not to use the bendy end. And this is going to give us some structural integrity in the cake. If you don't support your cake, then the top layer is going to collapse on the bottom layer, and kind of a chain reaction. This one's only 2 small tiers, so it's not as important, but it still is. So traditionally dowels are used, but straws I've found work just as well, unless you had a super heavy cake like a carrot cake or something. With this being a nice light fluffy cake, these straws will work. So I want to make sure that it's going to be underneath the cardboard from the 6-inch layer. So I'm going to make sure not to go past 1 inch on either side. So I'm gonna put these in all the way around. We don't want them to be poking out of the cake at all. So once I get them where I want them, I'm gonna push them down a little bit with the scissors so that they don't show. And then I'm not gonna stack the cake right now, but if I were stacking it, it would sit nice and level because I measured all of these straws to be the same height. You want it to be just slightly under the surface of your frosting so that your cake isn't lifted up off of the other cake. This one, it's going to sit on there nicely, and then the florist can decorate it with the flowers and everything. But make sure that you have some structure to your cake so that it doesn't collapse and you have a disaster. Again, I'm not going to actually stack the cakes until we get to the venue, but now the cakes are all ready to go.